Okay, we start.
Okay,
How are you, man?
thanks.
How is it
Thank you
going?
for thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, anytime. I mean, we had a very nice chat the other day, and you're actually the first person to be invited in this sort of virtual podcast. And, well, as you probably know, because of the virus, we can't actually meet people. And so that's why I decided to set up this podcast station in my place. How has it been for you, this virus thing? I mean, how did you react? What was your reaction?
I expected the type of reaction that we've seen. For me, was expected in the sense that people do their everyday lives and people engage with certain things, and I think we're all fascinated with something, with one thing or another, and people have shown in many ways that this was indeed a possibility. Some people that were scientists decided to help the cause. Politicians have engaged with the virus in a different way, and everybody has somehow followed the whole flow.
Right. One thing I didn't say is that I mean, who we are. I mean, I'm a scientist, and but you are a scientist as well. I mean, actually, the
Yes,
interesting thing is that we have a common background. You did the electronics, and then you did the material science in the UK. You were in
in
Leeds,
Leeds
right?
University,
Okay.
yeah.
And so you worked with the AFM, atomic force microscope related stuff.
So what happened is that when I was maybe 20, I was doing the degree in electronics, and I thought I always wanted to go to more fundamental things because practical things weren't enough for me. I wouldn't see the point of, okay, I build this thing and then what? I wanted to do something more fundamental. I was first thinking of particle physics, but then I went to nanotechnology. That's 15 years ago now. So it's just the very beginning of nanotechnology.
And then you got interested into artificial intelligence, I guess.
Well, actually, this was already before that because for a PhD thesis, I always had a plan. Say, I think I told you this. I had a plan that I was very interested in the Big Bang theory, in the sense that there are laws of the universe, and somehow these laws are there, and somehow we also here human beings are possible. So human beings are a possibility of the universe, right? So I thought, how can the laws of physics contain information in a way that they allow for human beings to be? Because somehow the laws must allow for this possibility, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So in that I was reading Hegel, and he had this sentence that he says that somehow the universe is consciousness knowing itself. And I thought that was, even though it sounds very strange, if you read philosophy, you say the universe is consciousness knowing itself. Somehow I thought that somehow particle physics and the whole theory of physics is quite compatible with that concept.
So this was an interest in philosophy, basically linked to physics.
Yeah, it was linked to physics, but I thought that's why initially I wanted to do particle physics. When I went for the masters, and I was accepted in Durham University. It's quite good, and they do very good research. But then I applied for nanotech because it was a new thing then, and I thought it was very, very promising also. So I applied UCL. UCL that year they started a nanotechnology program, a master's. But it was the first year, so even though UCL, of course, is very good, I was offered the position, but I rejected actually. And I took the one in Sheffield because they had been doing the course for 2 or 3 years, and I was convinced. So
And then we met in Masdar in
then we met
2012.
yes, well, I went there in 2011.
Ah, okay.
I worked really hard, and then you came in 2012, and I was in the pod of the guy I was working with, Matteo, and you came in with Marcus, and I met you. You were wearing a hat, actually,
Yeah, the cowboy hat.
the cowboy hat. So I remember that, yes.
And yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago. And then we both left. I left in 2015. You left. When did you leave?
I left in 2013, but then I went back 2014 because what happened is that in 2013 I left, and I thought I would do science, so I would apply for positions and that. But then I decided to go back because I knew the place and dedicate my free time because I knew the place, so I would have free time also to start working on this concept of mind and consciousness and all this stuff. Even though I don't go into consciousness or the mind because I think that's very one-sided, but that's what they call it. They call it philosophy of mind. That's what they call it. So They call it that, so I call it that also.
One of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is, apart from the fact that I would say that you opened my mind again with your book.
Thanks. Thank you, man.
I was interested in philosophy when I was in the high school. I told you that, and then for some reason I decided to go to electronics because I thought, well, that's more useful, whatever useful means.
Yes.
And then I basically forgot about philosophy. So I did engineering, and then I went to physics. You did the same thing, similar thing. And then I forgot about those questions. And I think those questions are very important when we are faced with problems such as this coronavirus problem. Maybe to open our minds a little bit more, try to understand what this thing means.
Yeah.
And so what I want to tell you is that my reaction when I heard about this virus thing in January, that it was spreading from China, well, I said things are gonna go bad here in England. And then eventually the thing came, and what was your reaction? I mean, what did you...
In fact, it's related to what you said in the very beginning. So the whole point, for example, for me in science, and you know that because you're a scientist, when you become a scientist and you really... Because I think that when I met you, I could tell that you really thought science was the way to truth somehow. You knew that science would tell you the truth of the world. As you said in the very beginning, somehow you stop thinking of other stuff. You take it for granted. You say, of course I'll know what to do. Of course I know how to live my life. Of course I know what common sense is. Of course I will make up my mind for this and that. And eventually you stop asking several questions. When things like this happen, people start thinking, what's the point of all this? And in fact, my course on metaphysics had 0 students, and 3 weeks ago, 10 or 15 people started taking it. So they're looking for meaning somehow. So people look for meaning.
So you wrote a book that is called The Fabric of Consciousness. And so, I mean, I want to talk about this before we jump to the virus statistics related stuff. And in your course, you talk about metaphysics.
Yes.
Now, when people think about metaphysics, they think about the religions, spiritual things, I don't know, yoga-related stuff.
Yes.
But if you read on Wikipedia, the definition of metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that examines the fundamental nature of reality, including the relationship between mind and matter, between substance and attribute, and between potentiality and actuality. So some people think that metaphysics is useless or meaningless or whatever. So my question is, why do you think it's important? And the other question after that is, what was that kind of disagreement between Carnap and Heidegger?
Yeah, so this question again is exactly the same question as the first one. First of all, I want to say about my book. The reason why it's called Fabric of Consciousness, it's because somehow we have fabricated a theory of consciousness. So it wasn't fabric of consciousness in the sense that I wanted to explain the fabric or the tissue or the mesh of reality or the mesh of or fabric of consciousness. I wanted to explain that this term consciousness, it's a term, but what does it mean? Maybe it actually is not needed for us to understand humans. So if we are to understand human existence, do we need this term, consciousness? Maybe not. But we take it for granted, right? And one thing I want to say that's very funny here is that when you told me that you bought the book, I thought, no way he will read it. And I think I told you this.
Yeah.
I said, he will buy it, open it, he say, that's crap, and we'll throw it in the bin. And more or less it happened.
Yeah, so
not exactly,
what happened is that I read the first 10 pages and I said, what's this book?
It's
because
bullshit,
I forgot
right?
the way those topics are dealt with. So I forgot that kind of language I was used to maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was used to maybe a book like this, I told you, this Novasin book.
Yeah.
It's a small book. I mean, it's one of those they sell so many copies. That guy is good. I mean, the guy is an old guy. He did so many things. He's a great guy. But these are kind of popular science books.
Popular science, yes.
And so when I took your book, I was expecting some sort of popular science book.
Exactly, and that's the trick of the
And the
title.
thing is that when you
Yes.
read these popular science books, they are there to give you answers.
Yes.
Your book is there to put people in a position so that they can ask questions. It's a different thing.
Exactly. So you got it fully. So when they read Fabric of Consciousness, they think, okay, there will be a theory of what consciousness is. But actually, and in fact, I say nothing about consciousness. I'll tell you something you will laugh very much now. So I want to give a talk called Can Machines Reason? I went to give this talk in Toronto in 2019, in March, in the World AI Forum. And somebody came and said to me, oh yeah, I've seen this book that you wrote. So what is consciousness? And I said, well, we say what things are. And she told me, but that's stupid. And I said, you said it. You think that what I said is stupid. So that's what you did. And she said, oh, but that doesn't answer anything. And I said, and you said it again. You said what things are. And then she said, well, but that's nothing. And I said, in the book, I also explained that sometimes we say that things are nothing. And you just said it. So I just told you what people do. We sometimes say that things are nothing. And she said, oh, but I don't like that. I also say that.
Yeah.
I also say that sometimes we say that we don't like that. And then I said to her, but do you really know what you say when you say that you don't like something? And she said, oh, I can think about that. And I said, exactly. So in the book, I also say sometimes we doubt and we use words and sometimes we get confused and we inquire the words. And there is a possibility that through language and a metaphysical, and to answer your question, because you asked, what is this thing, metaphysics? So it's possible that people think that metaphysics is something other than real. But in fact, you think you're dealing with the real, okay? You constantly think you're dealing with the real. But in fact, you have a belief that this thing that you call real is real. And that belief that you have is your metaphysics. So you constantly involved with metaphysics. Every time we speak, we invoke words. For example, when I say this table is a table, I think I know what this table is. So that way I speak about the table somehow has some presuppositions, right? Or did I actually get the table as it is in reality? Of course I think so. I know what a table is. But do I? That's the question. And if you inquire in this direction, you'll realize that language and tradition has passed over many things. And as you said, when you start reading my book, you realize maybe I used this word and I used to speak in this way. And I never realized that I do speak in this way. And in fact, I don't know why I speak in this way. So you got it right.
So what I did is that I read the first pages and I said,
Yes.
what's this? And then I told you, why do you have all those words under quotation marks?
Exactly.
And then you told me another thing. Why don't you have a look at my course? So I checked your course.
Yes.
On where do you have it, in Udemy?
Udemy.
Oh yeah, I checked the course there, and then I started thinking again basically, and then I opened your book again, and then I read all of it, and then I said,
Thank
okay,
you.
let's
I really
talk.
thank you for this.
And then I
really
said,
thank
let's
you.
talk about this, and then here we are basically.
And I really thank you, Samuele, for this because it takes effort. So it's a book. Put it this way: it's easy to read because we all know the things I'm telling in the book. We all know them. The only thing is that we don't pay attention to them. But I'm sure that when you were reading, you said, I know this, but did I ever pay attention to it? Probably yes, when I was a child. But after that, I just got on with life.
And you were mentioning also regarding this discussion the scholastic thinking.
Yes.
So what's up with those guys? Who are they?
Yeah.
And what did they?
So scholastics is basically after the Greeks. Everything went to the Romans. I'm speaking very generally right now. So after the Greeks, everything went to the Roman. And of course, Greeks experienced, say, the world in a given way. For example, if I'm scared, I experience something. If I look at this glass, I experience something. We all experience things what we call reality in a given way. And out of this, language evolves, right? So what happened with the Romans is that, and you're Italian, so
Yeah.
so it's very related to you. So what happened is that the Romans got very inspired by the Greeks. This is true. They were inspired by the Greeks. However, they experienced the world in a different way. So the Latin language was not the same as the Greek language.
They said they were corrupted by the Greeks.
For example, they were corrupted by the Greeks, but at the same time, they translated words from Greek into Latin. For example, the word intuition. For example, the word logos, logic. For example, the word reality, realitas, res, thing, things like that. So it was all translated. And eventually, the Roman, say, empire became scholastic. And what's a scholastic? The monks that do theology, they think about God. And now the world becomes reality. So there is the world, reality, this is reality. And then there is something else, the divine. But of course, the divine is not this. When I touch this glass, I touch this book, I'm not touching God. Somehow I'm touching it because it's not clear what it is that God is. So they started speculating about this, and they call this metaphysics. Of course, if there is the physical world, reality, and there is something else, they thought this must be metaphysics. Yeah. But in fact, this is the misconception. And I really like that you read the Wikipedia page because, look, metaphysics would be other than physics. But at the same time, they say it deals with reality. And then it says it has nothing to do with reality at the same time. So the word metaphysics is a contradiction in terms. And this contradiction has been passed to science, for example, in everything. In metalogic, metagenomics, meta-language. So the word meta has been taken from metaphysics, which, by the way, I want to tell you this, that Aristotle didn't write metaphysics. He wrote something that was called proto-philosophia, which was first philosophy. But then the scholastics, so the monks that were doing theology, didn't know what to call it because Aristotle wrote on physics. And then what do you do other than physics? So they called it meta, beyond, ta, the physica, beyond the physical. And from here, don't take this gently, because from here, every sort of problem comes. Because there is reality and something else. There is the physical and something else. And explaining this something else is a problem. So the word is really confusing.
Before I ask you about Carnap and Heidegger, what was the thing?
I based the course on Carnap and Heidegger because if you use the word metaphysics, some people in one extreme will say that it's meaningless, completely meaningless, because there is only reality. There's nothing else. Whatever that reality is. There are people that might say that there is something else. So now, Carnap was a logician and said that everything that was not logical, that didn't come from science and the scientific method and mathematics, was nonsense. Nonsense if you're trying to explain reality. So if you're trying to explain reality, it's nonsense. He didn't say, for example, that art is nonsense. He said that you can be an artist if you like, but you're not explaining reality. You're just expressing a view, which has nothing to do with reality. And you can also do sport, and you can also do even theology, but you will be entertained by it, but you're not talking of reality. So he attacked Heidegger in principle because Heidegger would like to say things like the following. The world worlds, or nothing nothings. What's this? How can nothing nothing? Right? So, and he did it on purpose. Heidegger did this on purpose because he was attacking logic, okay? And he was not attacking logic because he wanted a confrontation, because he wanted an argument. He was attacking logic because he was saying that we were framed by logic. So instead of looking at the world, we were looking at the world through logic, which is not the same thing.
Another thing you mentioned is that there are many, you just said that before, you said that there are many words we are familiar with, such as logics, for example, or truth, or reality, and you wrote that these concepts are basically floating. And so my question is if we can clarify the difference between truth, metaphysical truth, and true statements in, for example, in within a system such as math.
Thank you for this question also. It's a very important question. So now, I don't know who will watch your podcast, but for example, now there's many people listening to Sam Harris and also Jordan Peterson, and there are many other people also. For example, you commented recently on the Tesla guy, that they say that there is only science. There are also many very famous people like even Ricky Gervais that would even laugh at other than science, right? And the issue here is that even though they do laugh at other than science, they use the word truth. And the issue is that, and also they use the word logic and they use the word reason. And the issue is that I doubt these people. I'm not saying that they don't know, but I'm saying that we, including me, I doubt that we know where these words come from, and we are actually enframed in a metaphysics. We're all enframed in a metaphysics. We believe that we know the truth, but I ask you the following thing. For example, even for Ricky Gervais, if he says, but of course, science is true, I would ask him, who told you? Is it yourself telling yourself that science is true? And of course, he would give you an argument, but I would say, okay, and you believe that argument.
What does it mean by science is true? Whatever is within science is true, is saying.
Exactly. So of course, in the common language, if you listen to people talking, if you listen to the news, the newspapers...
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's the thing.
Well, actually, we know ourselves that science is not truth. As a scientist, you know that science is not truth.
Of course.
Sometimes, let's say I give you an example. Let's say that I have this sample with some material coated on it, and I take an AFM, I study that, I find some properties, and I publish a paper. But then it turns out I didn't prepare the sample well, so whatever I published is rubbish.
Exactly.
But I don't tell anyone. Is what I published truth? No, but people think it's true because it's published.
People think it's true.
So it's within science.
It's within science. But there are two things here, and I wouldn't like to confuse them, but they're very easily confused. So one thing is what is falsely claimed to be true within science, which is this example you gave. So I can say, for example, this air contains X proportion of nitrogen, oxygen, or any other molecule. But maybe my claim is false. But the issue that I'm claiming here is that this whole system of claiming what things are, the whole system itself, is a construct of reality. This is another thing. One thing is what's false or true within science, which is what you said now, that you can claim something to be true. But now to ask, what do you call truth? Now, if you ask science, what do you call truth? Science cannot tell you because science knows. Truth is this which can be repeated by other people and gives always the same results. And of course, when I say that, I say, but of course, that's truth. I say, okay, that's scientific truth, yes. And that's it.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, you did this new series of philosophy courses in addition to the initial one that you sent me, where you talk about the word as it is described as an interaction between subjects and objects. And you talk about this, and then, what's wrong with this kind of description of the word in terms of subjects and objects?
So actually, the way to get into metaphysics and ask the question, what is metaphysics, must happen already through metaphysics. You cannot somehow get out of metaphysics. They claim that being objective, to answer your question, being objective is required in order to know things. But my answer here is, yes, if you want to know objective things in their objectivity, you must indeed become or place yourself objectively in relation to objects. This must happen. But that's a tautology. You say nothing. All you're telling me is, if you want to be objective, you need to be objective. And I say, indeed. The story of Socrates basically explains the whole thing, in my opinion, because Socrates was killed on the basis of looking for truth. So Socrates wanted to find truth. But you know this typical saying, you will laugh here now as well, because there is this typical saying that people like to quote Socrates and say, I only know that I know nothing. They love that.
I know that
everybody loves that. I only know that I don't know.
Yeah.
But people say it and move on in their lives knowing everything. We all know everything, okay? We know what to do. We know which film to watch. We know that a sport is good for you. We know everything. But we like to say this saying of Socrates, I only know that I know nothing. But what was very interesting in Socrates' case is that he actually meant it. When they told him that he would die, we will now kill you, he said, you want to kill me only because you speak of things and I tell you that you don't know what you are saying. And now you want to kill me for that reason. And they said, no, it's also because you teach things that mean nothing. And Socrates said, no, for I only know that I know nothing, therefore there's nothing for me to teach. He said, it's only the wise men here, the sophists, that charge people to be taught because they have something to teach. But I only know that I know nothing. And then they said, okay, so you will die. And then the funny part here is that Socrates said, why, rather than killing me, don't you give me some free food in the market every day? And they saw that he was laughing. And they said, are you aware that you will die? And he said, because I don't know what death is, I cannot be scared of it. So that's the funny part. So he actually meant it. I only know that I know nothing. So even life and death, I don't know. So because I don't know it, I can't be scared of it. So that's a very, you laughed there because it's a very different way to saying, I only know that I know nothing. There are many ways to say it.
It's a bit tragic. And the tragic fact is also the thing that he was killed because he disrespected the official gods of the state, right? That was the accusation.
He was asking questions that destroyed society somehow.
Yeah.
So if society has, for example, imagine this. Now there's the pandemic. They tell us to obey some rules. Maybe they are correct to say that if we obey the rules, things will go in a given way. And maybe they are right that many more people will survive, things will work in a given way. So if you start asking questions in this direction, you'll make people doubt, and maybe people won't follow the rules, and maybe this thing which they expect to happen won't happen. So then the whole system will collapse. But Socrates didn't expect the system to collapse. He was just asking questions. But of course the system was collapsing. He said, you are enforcing things in the young people, and now young people don't want to obey the rule because of you. They were saying this to Socrates. So this is a very old problem. Thinking always gets in the way of breaking against the rule, right?
Yeah.
Because putting a rule always happens through thinking, but at the same time, working against the rule also happens through thinking. So thinking and rule are always in confrontation.
And I think it's also criminal to tell people to stop thinking. And I mean, that's something we also have in our democratic countries, where sometimes we have, that happens all the time in regimes, autocratic regimes, where basically if you criticize certain structures, you can end up in jail. So sometimes you have these structures that self-protect themselves with laws, and they say, well, if you think in that way, you might be sanctioned. So you might need to pay a fine, or you might end up in jail, or you might be ostracized in society. You might be attacked. So I think this way of thinking is a problem for the advancement of human thinking. But it's also criminal. I mean, it's a criminal way of doing things, I think, in my opinion.
It's criminal because...
Well, of course, I mean, one thing I didn't say, there is no way you can stop humans from thinking. They can always think. No. Even if they are in jail. You are in a jail, you can still think. But here I'm talking about public speaking, like writing a book, an article, or saying something. And
there's censorship in every way, yes. There are things that you're allowed to say, and not only this, as you know very well, if you have power in media and influence, what you say will be heard. So yeah, even if you now have a voice, who will hear it? That also depends on the power that you have.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of telling people to not talk. I mean, nowadays, look, democracy is the average, right? So if the media manages we have a lot of systems in psychology that know how to control the average. They have systematized. There's statistics telling you what you should do to control the average. So it's not even that you need to target the very clever or the very well people that know very much in one direction or
those
another.
are in the tails of the caution, so that
they're
doesn't
in the
matter.
tails.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. Because democracy is like that. Democracy says we do what the average says. So if you manage to tell the average what to do, then the average will say what to do. And then if the average says you shouldn't think in this direction, then you shouldn't think in this direction because it's anti-democratic. And democracy puts the rule, right?
Which is a paradox.
It's a paradox. But actually, Heraclitus already said 2,500 years ago that everything is like a bow, like the string.
Yeah.
So everything is in tension. Whenever you do something else comes from the other side, and there's always a tension. And the more you go in one direction, the more tension you create in another. And actually, Heidegger said that metaphysics and being are always in a battle. So when you say that the world is this, for example, if I say that the glass is this, there would always be a battle between what I say the glass is and the glass. The glass will want to speak for itself against what I say about the glass. So human beings are always in confrontation with everything, with what we say, what we do.
And so the other thing, I don't know, I don't remember.
I don't know if I'm going too philosophical for you.
No.
I don't want to.
Where is it?
Yeah. You might be the only person that has read that book.
I took some notes. And
I must accept that I rushed it. But I'm planning to publish again. I'll go through it again and I'll republish it.
Yeah. But I think one of the things, I mean, this is very superficial, but this illustration is amazing. I love that.
My wife did it.
Amazing. And you did the same thing in the website.
She's a genius, yes.
You said that the mind here is rather than taken as a wall of that which orients us in the phenomenon of orientation as such. So you said that the mind, under brackets, is something that orients us. Now, because I'm a scientist, I think about vectors. So is the mind a sort of thinking is a sort of vector that points us towards a certain direction? How do you explain that? What's the meaning?
I love that you ask these questions because in the middle of the book I speak of René Descartes, and René Descartes, one of these writings was the direction of the mind, how to correctly direct your mind. So he was telling you how to direct your mind in a given direction, okay? And that's one book. He dedicated one book, and that's the method, the scientific method, how to direct your mind in the right direction. Okay, he was saying that. But my question here is, how can you direct yourself in the right direction? You must know what right means before you actually start investigating this. And in fact, Descartes knew what was the direction of the mind supposed to be. The direction of the mind was supposed to be that which allows us to find certainty. So if you are very certain about something, you are in the right track, okay? In the book, as you see, I use the mind in between brackets because I'm saying this term mind was used by the scholastics, and it comes from spirit and soul. Actually, when Descartes speaks of the mind, he speaks of his spiritual ego. He didn't use the word ego, but his spirituality was some sort of thing outside reality. So it's not real, it's not in the physical world. So his spirit is somewhere within somewhere. He doesn't explain where, but it's not in the physical realm. And this spirit takes things from the outside, and some things are true and some things are false. So his whole job was to direct his mind only to the true things, to that which is correct, according to him, right? He was searching truth. And in the book I tell you that it's fine if you don't know. Why should we know all the time everything? And why is the only possibility of human existence to relate to things by knowing them? For example, when I drink this glass, I'm not interested in knowing the glass. My hand already knows the glass. Because if my hand didn't know the glass, I couldn't take it, right? So all the knowing of the glass that's needed here is to take it. And if you think that that's stupid, ask a robot to take the glass. You'll have to teach it. But I'm talking to you and my hand knows to take the glass.
Yeah.
And it's very certain. Don't worry about this. It knows what it's doing. But at the same time, I'm not thinking of doing it well. I'm just enjoying my drinking. And it's not a matter of knowing anything here. It's a matter of just drinking. But the robot, no. The robot must know where the glass is and the velocity and how to grab it. Okay, so all this is knowledge. But for us, it just happens. Because somehow there are things that we do that already know the world. Somehow every movement that I do with my hands knows world. Why? My hand knows when I'm moving. My whole body is not just my consciousness. It's not just that I'm thinking. And I'll tell you what consciousness would be here for example, Descartes. It would be the object of thought. So I don't have to go and think. I'll think about the right velocity for my hand to move. I don't do that. I just move the hand, and through my body, instantaneously, I know the velocity that I should do to not break anything. Whereas a robot doesn't know that.
Yeah, so you just spoke about the implication that directionality of a mind as in terms of artificial intelligence, basically.
Exactly.
So the thing is that when we design artificial intelligence, we already provide a direction.
Totally.
But the thing is there any artificial intelligence that can decide what's that direction? I mean, is that possible? I mean, is that something that can be done, or you think it's impossible?
The issue here is that we always think in terms of frames, okay? So you always work on a theoretical frame, and there is a very interesting confrontation here between two schools, the computationalists and, for example, Penrose. And if you took the course on metaphysics, I actually explained that the computationalists claim that the other claim that making a formal system will not work implies that a robot cannot be formal. Okay? But at the same time, and they give this other option, maybe the meaning is that humans, we, you and me, we do not know, because of the theorem of Gödel and Tarski, whether we are consistent or not. So what does this mean? We have internal contradictions, maybe, but the fact that we don't know them implies that we can decide. So we can set axioms for ourselves. For example, what's my axiom? I might say tomorrow, from tomorrow on, I'll do sport. Why? Because I decide so. Yeah. I'll place an axiom for myself. So now I have a system within which I can do stuff. But can a robot say to itself, from tomorrow on, I'll start doing sport? This is the issue. If it could say to itself, then it sets its own axioms to itself, then the robot, in fact, would be doing the same thing as people do.
People also lose direction, right? You spoke about that before. And yes. Sometimes there are other people that prey on them. And we have this constant preying all the time by gurus or even advertisements, whatever organization that try to redirect people towards specific direction, which can be you need to buy this, you need to follow this cult, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. But so this is the negative part. But then there is also the positive part, which is when you don't have direction, maybe it's a good thing because you can pause and maybe you can reorient yourself towards something that maybe is more meaningful in your life, right?
Exactly. And actually, look, we all know of this example. Sometimes something very strong has to happen, for example, the virus, for people to realize that they should have thought of something. So if something very strong doesn't happen, you don't start thinking. But the issue is that human beings always have the possibility to direct themselves, to set the axioms to themselves, to ask themselves to stop and think. But sometimes we simply lose it. And this happens all day. Yeah? This can happen to you in the morning, in the afternoon. But psychology, of course, and medicine doesn't like that. And the formality of the system doesn't like that because they want to have even a cure for this. So when you don't know very well what to do, go for a walk.
Or take a pill.
Take a pill or sleep it off, but never think. This is never good.
Or check social media.
Or social media, or go and talk to people. But actually, the fact that we can be bracketed, because I'm not claiming that being depressed is a good thing, especially the very strong side, but I'm saying that being sad to a certain extent, I don't know the level, I don't want to go here into politics, but not knowing what to do.
Is that necessarily, sorry if I stop you, is that necessarily something that leads to sadness? What would you associate not having a direction with sadness? Maybe
I didn't want to use the word depression because this is this has political implications. You should, in your talk here, you shouldn't support something like that. So I'm not saying that I support it, but it's not allowed. Say you should never say.
It's an example. You're saying maybe someone doesn't have direction, and maybe that results in depression, or maybe that results
Let's
in
use the word
being
boredom.
lost or
Let's
bored.
use the word boredom because boredom is politically correct. So sometimes you are so bored, completely bored, that everything becomes meaningless. In what sense? That you say, I don't really know what to do with my life, and everything bores me. Nothing calls me for anything. So I don't feel... We say the word motivated. Say, I don't feel any motivation for anything. Nothing motivates me. That's what we say. So when we say nothing motivates me, what that means is that somehow there is a distance between me and everything.
Okay.
So I look at things, and things are just there as a scientific object. So when things become true, and scientifically, they are just there in front of me as an object, then I'm completely bored. Because looking at graphene, if you have graphene just here in front as an object, and you look at it as the object it is, all that is left is boredom. That's it. And when you reach complete boredom, it makes you think. It makes you think, what is this thing here in front of me, other than what I normally call it? Normally I call it graphene, but what else is it? Right? So out of this complete, not indifference, because it's not even indifference, or maybe it's a very strong indifference, basically.
Is that the abyss, the Nietzsche abyss?
That is more or less the abyss of Nietzsche. You could attack the abyss of Nietzsche through boredom, also through depression, but also through... And I don't want to go into that direction, as I told you. But through boredom, you can attack it. So if you go to extreme boredom, and things become fully indifferent to you, at this point, attaching a value is impossible. So what value do I attach it? And at this point, if you tell me, no, this is good, you can say it's good, it's bad. What is this thing here? What value do I attach it? So at this point, the infinite pool of possibilities opens up as a can of worms. And this is the abyss of Nietzsche. And that's why Nietzsche said that one can handle as much truth as they are strong. So the stronger you are, the more truth you can handle. And what does this mean? To look at infinity possibilities, not just at one. For example, they tell you that you should do this in this way and in that. They give you a set of rules. So what happens if the set of rules that are possible is infinite? This is the same as zero, right? Infinite for us to choose is almost the same as no option.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is, structures are like containers, so boxes that we create to model or try to model the world. And these boxes come with axioms, which are things that cannot be proven. And they also come with objects and also with the rules that relate the relationships between objects. Maybe there are also subjects. And one of the structures is also mathematics. There are many structures. And Gödel said that he showed that the inherent limitations of every formal axiomatic system capable of modeling basic arithmetic. So he gave two theorems. Can you explain these two theorems, what was Gödel's vision, and basically what are the implications in terms of truth? Has this mathematical observation got any implication in other fields, in other structures?
Yeah, I say excellent because you're again going to the bottom of this. So the Greek tradition has told us that we must know. Actually, Socrates had to know. My question is why? He said he had to know. I don't know what. And what will he do when he knows the thing? I don't know either. So for example, let's put it this way, that I want to know this glass. And this glass is whatever the glass is. So once I know it, what happens between me and the glass? What's left? I know it, fine. And I know it in its truth. What's left for me to do? Being bored? So the issue here is that from the very ancient tradition, human beings have directed themselves towards knowing things. So we must know things. And through this knowing, one of the last things that happened is that in about 120 years ago, 130 years ago, science collapsed somehow because logic, even logic, set theory, and all these structures collapsed. Collapsing meant that the very bottom of them, the very origin, the very first decision, and here we're going back to robots, for example, can a robot decide, make the first decision? So it was shown that any set of systems, or any system like mathematics or algebra or any system, couldn't see itself for what it is. What does this mean? Algebra could not tell you why the axioms of algebra should be there. They just tell you that they are there, but somebody put them. Because you can set another set of axioms. So what happened here is that Gödel presented this problem, and then it got somehow involved with the program of David Hilbert, of Hilbert Spaces and all that. And David Hilbert had one slogan: we must know. So I don't know if he thought he was the first one to say that. I don't think he did, because he was a very clever guy. But in fact, we've been saying that for 2,500 years. We've said we must know, or more, right? We must know. So when that happened, about 100 years ago, actually about 90 years ago, Tarski and Gödel presented this theorem, and David Hilbert was not happy. He said, how come now you tell me that we don't know? And Gödel and Tarski said, look, in fact, we have proved mathematically that it's impossible to know. Okay, so that was a problem.
Yeah.
Because a mathematical proof, if they want to rigorously prove mathematics, and mathematics is telling you that it cannot prove itself, then you need to make something else other than mathematics to prove mathematics. But what else is there?
You do infinite structures like
regression,
Russian
infinite
doll.
regression. So that's what he actually did.
Matryoshka.
So what that's exactly. So what? and you will laugh at this one. I'll tell you. So let's see if you follow this argument. I really love if you try to follow this argument. What are you doing? You and me now. What are we doing now here? Talk, right?
We're talking, yeah.
We're talking. We're thinking. We're putting questions. We're deciding. We're saying, okay, this is good. This is bad. We're going this way. We're going that way. That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So mathematics doesn't know how to direct itself. It doesn't know. So something external must direct mathematics. That was very bad news for David Hilbert, because he said somehow mathematics is not final. Somebody else or something else must be there. But instead of thinking it's the human, because the human should not be, because I'm subjective and I only have opinions, instead of the human, it should be something that is a theory also, objective. So what happened is that Tarski decided to make a meta. What that means is as a formal structure on top of the structure that tells the structure below if it's true or false. But what that means is that the structure on top is free floating.
Yeah,
and that's the free floating. It's
you
free
need
floating.
another structure on top of that.
And you go into infinity. And eventually, infinity, very fine to the infinity, you get natural language, which means you and me talking.
So it goes back to the initial thing.
It goes back to the initial position, you and me talking. And actually they say that. They say eventually this can be settled by the experts discussing with each other.
Yeah.
They say, okay, that's what I'm doing anyway.
Already told you
So
that.
you get the point.
Yeah.
But here, Tarski was a very clever guy, of course, and he said, I do not want to go there. He said he didn't want to go there. It's a dangerous problem. So if you say to Tarski, but can you give us the first very original set of axioms? He says, no, I'm not doing that. And in fact, I see Tarski a bit like a fraud. For me, Tarski committed fraud because he didn't want to tell directly that we don't know what we're talking about. When we use the word truth, saying, I don't know what I'm saying. But Tarski didn't say it openly, right? So what happened here is that the metaphysical tradition came back again, and a very clever guy, I don't want to say the names, because some of them are alive, they say, oh, but I can solve the problem of Tarski. I will look into the object, and I'll say what the object is, and then the object will tell me what truth is. So they went back 2,500 years back to Socrates. So what epistemology is doing now is the same thing that philosophy has been doing in circles.
Right.
Because Tarski is dead. If Tarski was alive, he would tell them that that's stupid or that shouldn't be done. But of course, Tarski doesn't know himself, because if he says it, it's his opinion, okay? And he cannot make a system that tells everybody what truth is. So Tarski would say, okay, this is a very, very big problem.
So does this mean that also other structures, which can be, as I said, the legal system, it could be a company's code of conduct, it could be a religion again, are floating as well? These structures are built upon a certain objective, which can be different. For example, in the case of the legal system or the biblical 10 commandments, can be don't kill someone else, because that's a functional objective. Because otherwise, if you kill someone else, we will punish you or whatever. You mentioned that these floating grounds provide a need at hand in the form of a violent placing. There is a need because the need is. So it's a violent placing.
It's a violent placing because I say so.
So these structures are not true, but because they are floating, we need to place them violently. Is that?
That's the meaning. The meaning is that I will do like Tarski. I just say, I start here, and if you tell me why, because I say so. And this is the violent placing. There's no argument here. I could give you arguments, but eventually it'll be a circle. I'll go back to truth, but then I don't know what truth is. But then I will say that I know what truth is, but then I will go back and I say I don't know. I'll give you an example. Look it up in the dictionary. If you look fact as in law, fact, it tells you a fact is what is known, and what is known is true. So to know is a fact. If you know something, it's a fact. But at the same time, I know many things. For example, I can tell you that I don't like you, for example. And I know that because I don't like you. So that's a fact. So how is that untrue somehow?
Yeah.
But that's just an opinion, right? But it's also a fact, or isn't. In fact, you couldn't go to the court, say, look, you should go to jail. And I say, that's just your opinion. Okay?
So your system is floating. I don't believe that. I mean, I think that is not grounded, and I believe in another legal system. But still you go to jail.
You still go to jail. Because human beings, like in the same way that it happened with Socrates, is the same thing. That if you want to sustain a society, you need to put laws.
Yeah, otherwise it's going to fall apart, right?
It falls. We don't know.
By the way, that goes back to that you said it's a fundamental problem of philosophy. Let's say that you have a society where you don't have laws, so pure anarchy. Okay, there are those that can live peacefully and everything, they can live friendly and so on. But then there will be the ones that will try to screw up the system. So they will kill each other and they will kill everyone else. So you stop thinking.
And that's actually the problem. If you don't have humans, the word truth is meaningless. Why does the universe need to know the object? Tell me why the universe needs to know the fact. We all the time go to the confrontation of Heraclitus. You need the structure, but at the same time you need to fight it. You need the law, but at the same time you need to think it. So if you put the law and you think it, you break it, but at the same time you need it. And you need logic to think, but at the same time you need to work against logic as well. So it's always a confrontation. And anybody that has ever tried in the history of thought or science or call it anything that pushes in one direction, they always find this residue, this last bit that they don't know how to tackle.
Yeah.
And eventually it comes and bites them in the ass.
Like in the theory of everything that they are trying to...
In the theory of everything of strings, yeah. But imagine that this was true. Okay,
well, that doesn't work. I mean,
it doesn't seem to work, no. But even if it did, imagine that it did, it worked, it explained reality. Okay, we would have an explanation of reality, and then I would go play football.
Okay.
And I wouldn't need a string theory to play football. I play football anyway.
Yeah. So the other thing is that also science is a structure, which includes math, physics, chemistry, and so on. And, well, it's as well an arbitrary structure. In fact, you can create any sort of math starting from arbitrary axioms. You can also create different physics using different constants. And so what we use is something that is useful in terms of modeling reality, right? Now,
and getting products. I mean, if you want to make a television that works, you need to use science.
Yeah.
Because that's what science is, making things work.
Right, so one of these branches is statistics. Can you tell me what's up with statistics? I mean, first of all, what's statistics and what can statistics tell us about truth?
If you start with probability, because statistics somehow also uses probability, so they come together. So if you go to the standard page of Wikipedia, for example, probability interpretations, if you go to probability, they'll tell you that there are many interpretations. But then, when you read them, you realize that it's metaphysics. So there is subjectivity theories and objectivity theories. And some say something, and others say something else, and they're in conflict again. So there is a conflict between the two, and some say this and others say that, but at the end it's floating again. So look for any, and I dare you to do this. Look for the words, but don't look at them in the dictionary, because the dictionary is only one line. The dictionary always tells you what things are. But if you actually go and try to read the articles that explain in more detail, try to look for fact, truth, logic, reason, knowledge, probability, you're finished. I mean, once you start going in this direction, you see an empty space of theories. And when you have an empty space of theories, and this is your point, you asked me about decision, right? What do I do? Because if I have, for me to choose, if you tell me that for me to choose, I need to take on a theory, then I've already chosen to take a theory. But I can always say I don't want to take that theory, right? So the human decision must be before and prior to any theory. Because for you to accept a theory, you must have already accepted the theory.
Yeah, so the reason why I told you about statistics is because when people see newspaper articles where they show graphs and they say, oh, this is the mortality rate or whatever, people are gonna think, oh, that's what's gonna happen. But the fact that I toss a coin 10 times and I get heads doesn't mean that the 11 times I'm gonna get tails. So the fact that you have statistics doesn't say anything about the future. Okay, it tells you about what's likely to happen, but actually doesn't tell you anything about what's gonna happen to you.
Exactly. And so you have the key here. Look, we humans, we see the world mathematically. We are calculators. A machine is a calculator, right? But can a computer make a decision? Can a computer make a decision? No. It can calculate. But we humans believe that in order to make decisions, we must calculate, and the calculation will give us the answer. If that was true, then a computer could do it. All it should do is calculate, and the answer would be there, right? So here I see two things. Out of the question you posed, there are two things. One, that statistics tells you what could happen with some assumptions. So you always have assumptions, right?
Yeah.
You never have a theory without assumptions. A theory always has assumptions. If the assumption fails, then the whole theory can fail. Another thing is that even if the theory that you take told you the truth is not clear, it predicted the future by that. That's what I mean by telling you the truth. That it told you, look, if you choose this, this will happen. And if you choose that, that will happen. And I ask you this question now. Imagine that we say, you have two children and you love them same. And I say, if I do this, this one dies. If I do that, that one dies. Now, even if I tell you exactly what you should do for the outcome to be correct, the problem here is not to know the outcome. The problem here is that you don't want any of your children to die, right? So then you must say, do I take mathematics as what will tell me the best decision, optimum? That's ridiculous, because the optimum decision is that none of them die. So once you put, or humans always like to pass over the responsibility to something else. In this case, we pass it over to mathematics. We say, oh, we don't want to be responsible. We will ask mathematics what the answer is, and we will just take the mathematical answer. But my answer to you will be, my question to you will be, who told you to take mathematics as the principle?
Well, you decide.
You decide. Yeah. That's the issue.
So the thing about this COVID-19 statistics is that, well, it's statistics. And so my question when I see statistics is what's the source and how did they run the measurements? Because you see, for example, mortality rate. Okay, so someone dies, there is a doctor, he goes to the person that died, he does a test. Okay, he's got coronavirus, right? What measurement did he use? What what tools did he use to verify whether he died of a coronavirus? Maybe someone is taking coronavirus because it doesn't have the tool. Or what's the error in the measurement tool? Is that measurement reliable? So all these things, they all go into a global statistics, for example, for a country, where you have so many different people that do this measurement with different tools. There are different people that do things different. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they have something next to do. Maybe they don't have time. So that's why I say, and that's maybe my opinion, that if you really want to judge the impact of this virus, there's one thing you can be sure. If someone is dead or if he's alive, right?
Only, yes.
So I think if you really want to judge the effect of this virus, you need to look at how many people die, for example, every week versus time. And I sent you a graph that shows how many people die every week in the UK between 2015 and I think the 20th of April, or no, the 10th of April. And that shows several peaks, right? And each peak corresponds to the seasonal flu.
Yes.
Now, if you go to what's happening now, you will see a huge peak, which is higher than the peak that we had in 2015, where there was a bad flu. So you can actually see that there are more people dying. And also another thing, which is just between brackets, we have minima here in this graph. And this graph probably corresponds, I think they correspond to the Christmas time, when people don't drive. And that's why they don't die. That's why there are minima. So driving is a huge mortality cause. Well, there are many other causes, but so what's your view on this? I mean, in terms of statistics, because there is a mortality rate. Do you think these things are reliable? I don't think so. But
no, they're not. Look, you and I are scientists. If they ask you straight away as a scientist, would you pass these any of the papers you see published? Zero. I would, as a reviewer, I review papers for American Institute of Physics. I review, you probably review as well. We review papers. I would not pass them. Why? Because they don't pass the scientific method. The issue here is that if you want to do statistics, then there are protocols to follow. And now you have chosen the scientific method. So you cannot tell me, and Tarski tells you this. So even mathematically, we know that once you select a method, you should follow some rules for the method. And the governments are telling us that they are following the scientific method, and they are in fact lying, because what they do is not the scientific method. And you know that, and I know that as well. Why? Because we all know that what's happening here, all of the data is unreliable. I mean, it depends on the number of tests they do. Probably they're not even reliable.
Yeah, I mean, the number of infections, the number of people that died because of this, I think it's rubbish. But what you can look at is the total number of people that died.
Yeah, but they will tell you that they died, that not so many died, other than the ones that died, thanks to the confinement, and I don't agree on this. And this is where interpretation comes.
But in this graph, if people were driving, plus the virus, we would have more deaths. I mean, it's obvious, right?
Yes.
Because, I mean, this number here, it's...
Actually, even ictus. In Spain, ictus went down in Madrid because of air pollution. So the strokes went down.
Because now, because of the problems with the economy, and that's another story, maybe we're gonna get more deaths because of stress. When you are stressed, your immune system is compromised, right?
Yeah, but the very problem here that I see with this thing is, in terms of mortality rate, in order to know the mortality rate, you need to know how many people are infected. It's like my uncle. I'll tell you an example. My uncle didn't go to school. He doesn't know mathematics. So he told me, they say that 10% of the people that catch the virus die. And I said, no. Out of people that are given the positive test, that after taking the test they are given positive, 10% die. This is the correct statement in science.
Yeah.
But my uncle told me, yes, so that means that if I catch the virus, 10% probability that I die. And I said, no. For example, and I said to my uncle, imagine that now I take 5 tests only. In Spain, they only do 5 tests. How many people will die of coronavirus? And he says, out of 5, 10%, 0.5. So out of 10, 1. Out of 100, 10. So I told my uncle, so take no tests, do no tests, and nobody will die of coronavirus. And he said, that's true. If we don't do any tests, nobody will die. So that takes you to the problem that, in fact, you should know how many people have the coronavirus. And maybe I'm wrong, but what I'm thinking here is that probably the people like me, I got the coronavirus, I guess you also, I guess everybody has it. And what happened is that this virus doesn't kill much, but everybody gets it. So what happens is that most of us create antibodies very rapidly, so the concentration in the blood is very low. So when you take the test, it's very likely they'll say you don't have it. So that's why they're having a lot of trouble to, for example, with this, I go take the tests with my wife, I get positive, my wife negative. How can this be?
So that's why when you measure something, there is an error bar.
There is an
So
error.
I would like to see these error bars
They
in the
don't have it.
statistics they show. Because, I mean,
They
the
don't have
method you are using as an error,
Yes.
right? So those error
they're not
bars
telling you
should
the
be-
error.
Yeah, they're not telling you the error.
And my interpretation of this is that the virus goes to everybody really fast. So this thing, I believe, that it goes to everybody very fast. I think everybody in China has it, all of them. So what happens is that because everybody has it, even if it only kills 1 in 1,000, even though the flu kills, for example, 6 in 1,000, kills more people. But the flu, not so many people get it. Okay, maybe 1 million in Spain, in the worst case, out of 50 million. But this thing, 50 million Spanish people got it. That's to say, all of them. So out of all of them, even if it only kills 1 in 1,000, less than the flu, it will kill more on average because it got into more people. So that's what I think happened. One thing that I've been checking on the news, and it makes me think also, I doubt this virus is something that you get and in a week you feel better. I doubt that. And that's been the sweetest spot probably for this virus. So this virus has succeeded, I think, that's one opinion now, but I think it succeeded because you get it and the first week maybe you don't feel anything. Then 2 weeks after you don't feel anything, then something comes, then it goes, then comes back. So you have it for 3 months. So if you have a virus for 3 months, you give it more probability that other people will catch it through you because you've had it in your body for a long time. But that can happen only if it doesn't kill you.
When people see scientific papers, they think this is the truth. And the thing is that in a paper, there is not only an accurate measurement, there are other things. There is ego, there is politics, sometimes there is fraud. Sometimes there are so many things. There are measurement errors. So there are so many problems. So there is a plus, there is this problem with the academic publishing industry that forces people into publishing papers and publishing and publishing. So sometimes
330 papers on COVID so far. 330 by the WHO.
So it's a new field basically.
It's a new field.
And scientists need to publish papers so that they can get new jobs.
Yes. So exactly. That's what's happening. So this virus is a problem, of course, we all know. But what type of a problem? It's a problem in many ways. But many of the scientists, and you know this, I'm a scientist as well, I know that, they're getting into it because they see a possibility to publish. There might be a bigger problem. I'm not saying that there's a bigger problem than coronavirus, because nowadays you're not even allowed to say that. So the only problem nowadays is coronavirus, only. People only die of coronavirus.
Yeah, maybe for the majority of people that's the main problem. And then there is also another distinction that we need to make probably, which is something that people normally don't know, is that scientific papers have different, are rated in a different way. So the fact that you publish in a peer-reviewed journal, then there are the archives. The archives are not peer-reviewed. Peer review means I do my science, I write an article, and then I submit this article to a journal, and then the journal, the editors, they send it to these other experts that evaluate my research. But what does it mean, evaluate? They don't know, by the way, they don't know anything about your work. They're just checking whatever they are checking, if that makes sense. And maybe they are busy with other things, maybe there are competing interests, and maybe because they don't have access to the data, right? So they just have kind of superficial check. Okay, so let's say that this thing is published. So what's the journal? Journals, well, that's the way they value them, are valued based on the impact factor. Now, if you publish in a predatory journal, maybe it doesn't even have impact factor, but if you publish in Nature, it has impact factor maybe 30, and that's probably what you published, maybe it's a good thing, but there have been many retractions in Nature as well. Now, there is this paper that was published in a journal called JAMA, which has an impact factor of 51, supposedly good. And it's a study they did for patients hospitalized because of coronavirus. Now, the interesting thing is that they studied something like 5,000 people, and they found out that this was all over the news, that 93.9% had comorbidities, other diseases and stuff. And of these people that were hospitalized, 56.6 had hypertension, 41.7 had obesity, and 33.8% had diabetes. That means that people that got the virus, a lot of them were probably eating junk food, and they were smoking. Well, if we exclude the genetic things that cause these problems, if you just...
Or maybe you lived in a very polluted area.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Maybe you don't care about cars, you don't care about pollution, you only care about jobs, and you pollute everything, and then you die out of it.
Yeah, I mean, New York is highly polluted, right?
Also Madrid. And the north
and in Bergamo, in Italy, that's also a highly industrialized area.
Very highly polluted places have high mortality of this virus.
But it's also true that in this kind of environments, people do fast, they live fast, they eat fast food, they are stressed, so their immune system is compromised. And of course, if your immune system is compromised, then it's more likely that you get sick, right?
This virus seems to attack this type of people. But having said that, think about this. And I want to give you a statistic piece here also. Spain, 2017, we were already 47 million people in Spain, so it hasn't changed. Over the past 3 or 4 years, the population of Spain hasn't changed. In 2017, 430,000 Spanish people died. 430, okay? The year after that, 480, 50,000 people more. Why? I don't know. Pollution? Maybe the heat wave, something. So something killed an extra 50,000 people. So what you know, and I know as well, because we're scientists, and maybe you can put, when you put this podcast online, you could actually show that. People think that things are straight lines, okay, sometimes. But we know, scientists, that things have noise. So go up and down.
Yeah.
So if I say that on average, 450,000 people die in Spain, plus minus 50, it's fine. It's only about 10%, okay, of noise.
It's within the tolerance.
It's within the tolerance. So sometimes in Spain, 400,000 people die. Sometimes 500,000, okay? You wouldn't even look at this, but I really think the media has given coronavirus a lot of relevance. If you think about it, even if it was true that 200,000 people have died in 2 or 3 months, if you look at how many people have died in 2 or 3 months in the world, let me count it. That's 150,000 more or less. So 1.5 million, 5 million. About 15 million people have died in the world in 3 months. 15 million, 1.5, okay, million. 200,000 out of 15 million is within the error. It won't be noticed.
It would be interesting to plot the same kind of graph I sent you for Spain and see what happened in Spain.
No, I'm sure that week-wise, something happened, right?
Yeah.
But okay, maybe people find it strange that some people die in 1 or 2 weeks, and they would rather people die spread out in 3 or 4 months. But at the end of the day, in 1 year, people will die, right?
So you're saying to do the same graph where you show number of deaths by year.
Per year.
So cumulative by year instead of accumulating by week.
Exactly. I mean, if you go by week, the good thing is that you can find causality. And I think that's what you're doing here because you're a scientist. A scientist wants to know the cause of death, right? But if you take into account that life in general is very complex, it's not just viruses that attack. It's maybe a heat wave. It's maybe somehow that pollution got very high or something else, some other factor.
Yeah.
Throughout the year, people will die for X things, right? So it's like a straight signal plus noise.
By the way, there is also another thing. Worldwide, thinking about the worldwide, there was also another article that said that due to the disruption caused by the coronavirus and also there were problems in some regions in Africa, there might be, I don't know many millions, but millions of deaths due to famine.
I mean, think about that. In 1 month, about if 35,000 people on average, we don't know exactly the cause, right? When you say somebody dies of hunger, it's not exact. It's the same as coronavirus. Did they die really of coronavirus only? It's not clear because
Well,
they
I
might
mean,
have
if there
another
is no
disease.
food, you
Exactly.
die. I mean,
Yeah, but you can die because of not food, because somehow you indirectly have a problem with the lung or with the
okay.
stomach, something else. So it's not so simple. But say 35,000 people die a day because of hunger for X reasons, but more or less because of hunger. That means in 1 month is 1 million people. So in 3 months, 3 million people have died of hunger, as against 200,000 people with corona. Again, we're calculating here, is what I told you. Human beings are highly mathematical. Of course, it's not the only way to look at things, but it's a possibility. You can look at things mathematical and say, okay, so how come the corona has killed 200,000 people and world hunger has killed 3 million people, 1 million a month? 1 million a month, really? That's quite a lot. I wouldn't have to do the calculation, but yeah, it's very high. Okay, so it's killed many more. Somehow, some is given more importance than the other. This thing needs to be considered also.
Yeah. So the other thing is that, well, that apart from dying or having all these health problems due to the virus, there is also another thing, which is fear, which is what I discussed before, fear. And then you have fear in the people, which translates to fear in the government. So all these world governments, basically based on incomplete information, they had to take decisions, and some decide to lock down countries, others decide to do other things, like in Sweden. So what do you think of these sort of decisions that they take with incomplete information? Because it's very
It's
hard
not.
to decide. I mean,
Yeah,
and then
it's
you
very
can always,
hard.
if you do politics, you can always go to those prime ministers. You can tell them, you did the wrong thing, you did
Yeah.
bad, and you should have done otherwise. But then how can you know, right? I mean,
How can you know? So again,
so I
this
think it's
the
I think it's very easy to attack these prime ministers or whoever is head of state based on this
Yeah, it's
consideration,
it's
because I
very
mean,
easy, but at the same time, if you want to lead a country, you're taking on a big responsibility. So you need to stand for what you've done. You've said that you think you're good enough to lead a lot of people. So you need to be able to do it.
I think these
And
people were in a position where they said, well, if we leave everything open and then many people die, it's gonna go bad on us, right?
I think so. I think that politics
So they got
nowadays,
scared.
sorry about this, but I think if you put anybody in politics nowadays, more or less they will do exactly the same, because more or less what they do is to follow the media. So if the media says X and that will mean more voters, then they do that because the media said so. More or less. I'm not saying completely, but on average, the decisions are very biased towards wanting to stay in power, right?
And here we're talking about democracies, but if you're in a dictatorship, it's different, right? Because the media is controlled by the state.
My opinion is that in places, for example, like China, it's possible that the government says to the media what to say, and then the people in the media will say what to say.
Yeah.
And the people in China, they will listen to the media, and on average, they will believe it. For example, I had this friend from Guangzhou. He called me 2 or 3 weeks ago. He was very worried for me. He said that in the news in China, he was hearing that everybody in Spain was dying. And I said, no, it's not like that. Look, they say that about 20,000 people have died in Spain in a month and something. So some months over the past 3 or 4 years in Spain, some months almost 50,000 people have died. 50,000 in 1 month. We're saying that because of the coronavirus, in in a month and a half now, 20 something people have died, 20 something thousand. And actually, in the month, it was 45,000, which was lower than the year of the cold of 2018. So it's true that maybe this peak that you show me, it's possible that the coronavirus has a peak like that, okay? That it peaks. So it's very narrow and it peaks in a few days, but it doesn't seem to spread like the
Yeah, that's
cold.
probably something that can be evaluated in a few weeks or months.
Yes, yes.
So,
But it seems already the case because the UK did like that also. Is starting to do it. And Spain has done it, and Italy also. So initially it has a peak, and I'm thinking that probably many other people died with coronavirus or of coronavirus, but they weren't reported.
When this was happening, I said probably I should have known more about finance.
Initially, about 2 months ago, when I saw it coming, I saw in China it was happening, and I saw it coming here. I said, look, it will collapse, the stock market. I didn't know the extent, but I knew. So I said, look, it's a bad thing, but what should be done is invest against the market.
Yeah.
So you should put money saying that the market will collapse, and you get money out of this, actually.
Yeah.
And then I sort of wanted to do it, but in the end I didn't do it fully because I thought, look, I won't do it. I don't know. It's also, you need to think also of investing in the sense that what you're doing sometimes is playing with people, right?
Yeah.
So I think many people have made a lot of money out of this.
Yeah. That's
a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there are also people making money with other things. Think about Amazon. Now it's making lots of money.
The
Think
masks.
about those people making masks and
the toilet paper people.
Yes. What did I buy toilet paper? I mean, for what?
I think I have a theory. Listen to this one. Let's see what you say. What do you call in Italian toilet paper? How do you call it?
Carta igienica.
Igienica.
Yes.
So igienica is a word that is hygiene. That means anything hygienic.
How do you call
clean.
it?
Papel higiénico in Spanish also.
Yeah.
But also in English, you can also call it hygienic, right? Somehow. Not many people know, but it's also known more or less. That is hygienic. So I think that people associated the word, because toilet paper can also be called hygienic paper. So they said, I need to buy things that are hygienic. And anything that had the word hygienic on, they bought.
And they stopped buying Corona beer.
For example. So anything that was Corona, I don't buy. And anything that is hygienic, I buy. And I think the toilet paper probably is something to do with this. Probably. I don't know, but it's something that I thought.
Yeah. And I mean, this thing is unrelated. Kind of related, but let's go back to the stuff we were talking about before, about scientists. Can you tell me something about Einstein's paper? It spoke about being a true scientist versus being a scientist served by economical interests.
Exactly. So actually, this is one of the first papers when you told me you wanted to buy my book, because I thought Samuel is too much of a scientist. When he takes my book, he'll read it and he'll throw it in the bin probably because he's a scientist, right? So you wanted to see a theory of consciousness, and I didn't provide that. So what happens is that I gave you this paper because Einstein says there that the decision of the scientist must come before science in terms of this. What do I, as a person, expect from science? And this decision cannot be given to you by science. Because if you put science as an object outside you, if you are looking at science now, you're not moving within science, right? You're now looking at science and saying, let's see what I can do with science, or what does science mean? If you're looking at what science means, of course, if you ask this question already within science, you're not asking about science. You're asking within it.
Yeah.
So you must place yourself outside science and ask this question. And Einstein said...
That's what he did, right?
That's what he did. And he says, in this paper, he says that there are two possibilities for scientists, he said. And he predicted that scientists must do one of the two things. And he said it, actually. And actually, he was in agreement with Tarski because he was very good friends with Gödel. He knew this very well. So at that time, Gödel liked to watch the film, and Einstein never wanted to go with him, to watch The Snow White. Gödel liked it, and Einstein didn't like it. So Gödel watched The Snow White many times in the cinema, and Einstein said he wouldn't go watch that, and he would prefer playing the violin. But in any case, he knew very well these problems, not only because of Gödel, but Einstein was a clever guy, of course, and he was a real scientist in the sense of the word real, that actually says what real means, to be a real scientist. Actually, Einstein says that to be a true scientist means to have the strong conviction that science is taking you to the reality of the universe. So science is the way to know the reality of the universe. If you have this strong conviction, and actually Einstein says it, he says, and this conviction cannot be proved by science or by logic, something else. And Einstein knew this very well. And he actually says it in this way. And then he says, if you say this, then you are a scientist. Then you have two possibilities. One, you might say, I'll do science in general. So I'll do gadgets, I'll look at products, I'll look at doing anything with science, just looking for truth, the truth of science. Or I will try to look for the purpose of science. In what way science should be used? You have these two possibilities, right?
Yeah.
So you've done that. I've done it also, Samuel. So we as scientists, we've done this. Sometimes we just do something, say, wow, this is amazing. This is a great science. I'll do it. And other times you say, I want to look for I don't even want to look. I see a very big problem here. I want to solve it because I think it deserves being solved. For example, maybe some people do it for the coronavirus. I don't know. But maybe they do that, okay? They see a big problem, they want to solve it. So Einstein said that we must choose, right? The problem here, and going back to politics, is that Einstein said that the scientist has become an instrument. Yeah. So the scientist is not anymore a thinker. They don't think. And thinking means this. First of all, to make the decision. Before you do science, making the decision is thinking. Because that will give you a headache, right? To have to think of this. Once you're doing science, you don't get so much of a headache. Also, because you're solving problems. But thinking for Einstein was this, making this decision. And Einstein said that he predicted that the scientist would become, and the path was to become an instrument for the corruption of the politicians and for the corruption of the system, and that scientists were doing the following. Scientists were providing a world where the power would be taken by a few over everybody else. And we've seen it here exemplified with the state. The state tells us to go home, and we go home. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but they can do it. And they have this power. So they have the weapons, they have the police system, they have the institutions, they have the networks, the internet, they have power over everything.
Different governments had different reactions. In Spain and in Italy, it's like police state now. But in England, the UK, we still enjoy freedom. Because, I think the perception of freedom here in the UK is very strong. Due to the past they had, due to the history. It has always been a place of democracy. And so, people can go out for running and exercising. You don't see police around. I haven't heard of... Well, there have been some cases, but you don't hear about people complaining that they've been stopped by police and stuff. And people in general are responsible.
First of all, who is to tell you what freedom is? Actually, you use the word responsible. What is to be responsible? To be responsible is to make the decision for yourself. What does freedom mean to me, right? But you need to take this. You need to take on your own. You cannot give it over to mathematics for you to solve it. So what the Spanish government has done, in my opinion, and the Italian, they've given the responsibility over to the experts. And I do it in between brackets because the experts are calculators, right? They put them to compute something, say, give me the outcome, and whatever is higher, I'll choose that. So what's higher? This leads us here, so let's do that. Yeah. But possibilities, there are many, right? Because when you touch something in the world, you're touching everything. You're touching the economy of people. Many people were poor before, now they'll be even worse. And other people were about to be poor, they will be poor. Other people were getting out of poverty, now they will be very poor. And being poor kills a lot. And actually, I'll tell you one thing. Being poor causes a lot of headaches. Paying bills, not knowing when you'll get your job, the uncertainty of thinking that you don't know if you'll be able to pay the rent. All these are major problems, and they affect the immune system. They affect our relationships. They affect every decision that we make, even junk food. When you feel bad, when everything is uncertain to you, You go to the fridge and take the worst food on average. I'm not saying
maybe
everybody.
you drink more, you
smoke more.
Smoke, yeah. Yeah, so and the thing you were mentioning about Einstein before, because I should have asked it before, is that Heidegger said that science itself does not think and cannot think.
Yes.
Now, sometimes, how about scientists? Can they think? Sometimes you have scientists that are so focused in their narrow fields that seem to have lost the common sense, whatever that means.
Look, Samuele, you're a clever guy. Why do we call expert systems?
Yeah, so the difference between experts
systems
and scientists.
But why do we call in electronics, in control engineering, why do we call expert systems mathematical programs or algorithms that make a decision in one thing? Because they are expert systems, right? But if you ask them something other than that, what do they know?
Yeah.
Nothing. So if you get involved too much into one thing, if you've already made the decision and you only want to see one path, and you think within that framework, you're not willing to ask the reason why you made the decision. And even if the decision is not logical, for example, and I always go very personal here because nobody can come and tell you how your family should confront life, because at the end of the day, life is a confrontation. We struggle to stay alive, right?
Yeah.
So I want to be alive tomorrow, if possible, and you need to let me choose if I prefer to fight the virus or poverty. If you tell me it's better to fight the the virus in this case, but tomorrow I have to fight poverty and you leave me alone, which I think this is what will happen. So what I think that will happen is that the governments, once the virus is gone, they'll leave people alone to fight poverty. And that's what will happen. So they'll be alone fighting something that they didn't choose.
For example, here now in the UK, there are lots of incentives and money from the government for companies. Basically, these people can get money from the government. They can get 85% of the salary. But I guess in Spain and in Italy it's different. In Italy it was ridiculous.
They also get it.
In Italy the amount was ridiculous in Italy.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Spain they get 70%. It's called ERTE.
Okay.
And many of them say, "Oh, I think I have an ERTE," and that means that the government will pay them even if they don't go to work because of this extreme issue. But in fact, most people haven't been paid yet. And also, I'm telling you, Spain will lose about 15% of the capital, right? It's a lot of money. So it's a lot of money. So they need to make up for this. And look, as long as humans are alive, they can do stuff. I don't believe this would be ridiculous. Imagine that everybody in the planet is alive and we say, "Oh, now we have nothing, we'll die." That'd be ridiculous. We have ourselves, which is enough.
So it's a challenge. People probably will come up with the new solutions. But I mean, the same thing happened during the war, right?
Yeah.
After the war, there was a miracle in many countries. I mean, think about Italy. After the war, there was huge development in the 50s and the 60s, and then
Germany as well.
Yeah. So
but the problem here is this: why should we wait until everything is destroyed to be motivated to fabricate it again? This is ridiculous. I mean, what type of living is this? So as long as things are well done and fabricated and everything is in place, we say, "Oh, there's nothing else to do. Now what will we do? We are bored." Okay.
So you need to destroy that.
You destroy everything, and now everything blossoms again. So we are stupid. I think this is my opinion.
I want to ask you a last thing about artificial intelligence.
Okay.
So when we try to develop artificial intelligence, do we even know what's intelligence? And I make a comparison with the SETI program, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. You look for intelligence outside the Earth, but here on the Earth, and as a scientist said, we don't even know how to speak to, for example, animals like jellyfish. We can't even talk to the jellyfish. How do we search for intelligence outside the Earth if we don't even understand our intelligence and other animals' intelligence? So this is a kind of dilemma. So what's intelligence and how can that be replicated by artificially?
And you're getting here again to the very fundamental problem. So if you ask what is intelligence, at this point you're going for the very axioms, right? Because if you already think intelligence is calculating or predicting, you have the axioms, right? And this we have no problem with. Science can do it. If you tell scientists predicting is intelligence, then they will be doing very good things that predict everything.
So I
They'll
take
do
a neural
algorithms.
network, I put some
Yes.
training set, I train the network, then there is a validation set, the network does its job, and that's it, right?
Yeah, like driving a car. You tell the car, the destination is this one, and I want to get there as soon as possible with the least traffic possible. Once the conditions are set, the machine can do it better than the human. This I'm sure, because the machine can look at a lot of information and optimize, okay? But figuring out precisely the axiom is the problem of the human. And what's happening here with intelligence again is that because intelligence is a free-floating term, we don't know very well where this word intelligence comes from and how it started and what it actually meant originally. So because we don't have it axiomatized, we say, but what is intelligence?
So how do you design artificial intelligence if
you don't have the axiom, science can do nothing, because science can only do things when there are axioms. If you tell to science, do something intelligence, science cannot tell you what intelligence is.
And that was a problem with the MIT, right?
That was a problem with MIT. So what happened in MIT in the 50s, Minsky and others, 4 or 5 pioneers, started the first conference on artificial intelligence, happened in MIT. So what happened is that they met and very few people went. They thought it would be amazing. Everybody would come to this amazing meeting and conference. First time we have this word, because the word is amazing, artificial intelligence. So very few people went there. But he said actually that in the 70s we would have reasoning machines, because he thought that reasoning was to be human. So if you think that reasoning is being human, all you need to do is something that reasons. The problem is, what is reasoning?
Yeah.
If you don't have the axioms, you cannot develop anything. And then they encountered the very big problem, common sense, and it came to be known as the common sense problem. And they realized, scientists for the first time there, that we don't know what common sense is. If we knew, we'd have the axioms. That's what having the axioms is. And then you frame it and you develop the whole theory. But they didn't know. And it was really funny if you go through the problems that went on there. And I don't know if you have time for this, but if you go into this, it's a funny thing.
Yeah, I started reading the paper you sent me about the MIT.
Dreyfus,
yeah.
Yes. So Dreyfus was amazing because look, I'll tell you very, very simply, but Dreyfus said, so I thought these guys want to do artificial intelligence, which means they must know what being human means, which means that they know what existence is, existing as a human being. And he said, and I wanted myself, philosophers have been having this question for thousands of years, and we still was questioning this. So then he was in MIT at the time, and he went to the gurus of artificial intelligence. He was just starting. And he said, so how are you planning to do this? And they said, no worry, the philosophers had it wrong. We will apply the scientific method and we will, in fact, achieve what you never did before. So where philosophy failed for thousands of years, we'll solve the problem scientifically. So Dreyfus was curious and he went and he says, and I realized a few weeks after that they were actually going into philosophy and using representational theories from Kant. So they went back 200 years in philosophy, and they use concepts from philosophy, which is this. Let's see if I can explain to you. So what happens is, for Kant, the human being is like something inside, like a mind that is not a physical mind. It lives somewhere in another dimension. So humans live in another dimension. Human reason is not in the physical world, is somewhere else, okay? And what happens is that this entity that is me grasps things from the outside and turns them into objects, representational objects. And they were very happy about this because with Kant, because scientists said, great, so what we need to do is grasp objects and do the abstraction, and we construct the object outside, and it's a matter of linking objects. But they run into the problem of the infinite regression because, as you know, when I look at this glass, how many things can I say about this glass?
Well,
Infinite.
Infinity.
So this is a problem because I can say infinity things. So when I abstract this thing, what do I say about the glass? Tell the computer what this glass is objectively. It will tell you the weight, the material. Basically, it'll be stupid. It will not know that it's a glass to drink. Okay. And this is where neural networks have succeeded, because what they do is they say, okay, let's tell the machine that this is a glass to drink with. And now, knowing that, learn it. But they need to tell it first, this labeling, right?
So basically there is no way you can code common sense and intuition.
No. So far, no. And also, one of the big problems is that common sense, it's very obscure as a term. And it comes also from a scholastic tradition, from the monks, right? And intuition is even worse, because intuition meant thousands of years ago that this spirit inside of me speaks directly to God. So in this immediate communication, it's theological. Basically.
It's something that comes out of nowhere. Like, oh, I had an intuition. I had this great idea and I want to do this, I don't know, this new product, new technology or...
Exactly. So now you see the problem. How can a scientist say, okay, I will tell the machine to get intuition, and where is intuition coming from? From nowhere. It's impossible. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is a funny one. I hope that you read that article. I also sent you an article I wrote that's called Rounding Out Morality, the Mathematically Represented Human. So in this article, and I hope you read it, but in this article I explained the whole thing. So the whole issue with MIT, I explained there. And I also go into the problem of common sense.
That's your article, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I read it. I already
you read it?
Yeah.
So you read also the problem of common sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, common sense, what is this? So they, and actually 50 years after in MIT, they said, we don't know what common sense is. They actually had to say, I actually read a few articles where the gurus of the 50s, when they were 80 or 90, before they died, they said, machines are dummy. So I hope out of all this conversation, you don't take it that I don't think that science can do stuff. Science succeeds in producing products. So I'm sure science will do a machine that can do stuff, any type of thing. So science can do it. But now, will humans know what they've done? This is another issue. This I doubt. They will do it, and it'll be something else. It'll be a product. Okay, but do we know what we've done? It's like with the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
They did it. What have we done? We've done something.
Okay, man, I think we're gonna close it here. We've done like 2 hours. And yeah, thank you very much. I think it was great.
Yeah, I also enjoyed.
Hopefully we can meet in person. I don't know when.
Yeah, I will go see you. Or you can come here in the summer.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.